what we hope to do with our panel here is to explore the ways in which we can rethink roles within the various actors of the criminal justice system and what we can do to ultimately provide better outcomes from that system. And we have some very innovative people here today, and I'm going to allow each panelist to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their work. So, Judge, you can start with this.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so loud. I don't think I need the mic, but I'll record you. True, thank you. So my name is Betsy Hay. I'm a United States Magistrate Judge in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, and I'm situated in the Philadelphia Courthouse. I have been a magistrate judge for 18 years. Before that, I spent about 12 years as a public defender in the Federal Community Defender Office in Philadelphia after several years of private practice. So I'm on the panel today, I believe, because I am one of two judges. The other is my colleague, Magistrate Judge Pam Carlos, who many of you may know, who oversee our court's version of a mental health court. It's called STRIDES. It's been in place in our court since about 2010, first as a pilot and more recently as a permanent program of the court. It's one of three specialty courts that we call them in our district. We have two reentry courts, which are STAR programs, which are for individuals completing lengthy sentences who fall into high recidivism risk categories, who are supervised closely, and after 52 weeks of successful completion of the program are eligible to have reduction in their periods of supervised release. One is the other court is relapse prevention court, which is also what I'd call a reentry model. Ours is also mostly a reentry model. It is not a diversion court. So most mental health courts that you'll be familiar with exist in state court systems that have, a wide variety of charge profile, from the very serious to the least serious. In federal court, it's almost entirely felony prosecutions. It's much rarer in a federal system to have a diversion court. So we do not have a diversion model, but we have two tracks in our STRIDES program. One is a post-conviction track, and that's the kind of more reentry model, folks who have completed sentences, they're on supervised release. And we also have a pretrial track. These are folks who are on bail, they're on pretrial release, and they participate in the program, but there's no quid pro quo for their successful completion of the program. Their sentencing judge, their presiding judge, is aware of their participation and their success if they are successful. So it certainly can have an impact, but there's no programmatic impact for successful completion of the pretrial track. So that's just a really, really, really basic description of the program. The way it works is we have court every other week, and everybody comes and we have a report from their supervising officer. We have a little back and forth from the bench. Everybody's present in court at the same time. So that's what the program looks like. I know we're only supposed to have 5 minutes for the intro part. The other thing I just wanted to mention is, to the extent you are working in a system that is looking to build a program like this, some court-based mental health program, just to emphasize the critical importance for development of the program, but also then maintenance of the program, is a team approach. Everything we do is sort of based on the team. And the team consists of the court. We've got two judges who are connected to it, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Federal Community Defender's Office, the Probation Office, the Pretrial Office. We also have certain other kind of partners. And you have to have the buy-in from all of those and the active participation and support from all of those to be able to build one of these programs, but then also to kind of keep it going. The other piece of that is we've never had difficulty finding people in all of those offices who are interested in working with and on these programs, because we all recognize that, you know, there are lots and lots and lots of folks who find themselves in the federal criminal justice system who do need these supports. Our programs are all voluntary. So for those who want those supports, we want to have something there for them. So that's my 2 cents.
My name is Gavin Holohan. I'm the elected district attorney in Lehigh County and came to that position just last year. So it's been 15 months that I've been the elected district attorney. The year before that, I was the first assistant district attorney in the Lehigh County Prosecutor's office. And for 25 years before that, I was a criminal defense attorney. And I did criminal defense in state court in Lehigh, Northampton, Carbon, Berks, Bucks. And I also did criminal defense in federal court, where we dealt with, she said, not too many people getting diverted in federal court. A lot of people getting convicted in federal court, 98, 99% conviction rate. And a lot of people going to jail for a long time. Since I've taken over as district attorney, I found that there are some benefits to the district attorney's office that public defenders, for example, don't have, which is access to funds that are above and beyond taxpayer funds. So we get a budget from the county, which goes through the same budget process as counties do, which can be painful. No offense. However, in the prosecutor's office in Pennsylvania, at least, we have drug asset forfeiture money. And what that is just what it sounds like. It's drug assets and cash and property that's been auctioned off. That money is then, by statute, attributable to the discretion of the district attorney to spend in ways that are attributable to decreasing crime and decreasing drug use and drug abuse. And we have to answer to our controller's office. The county has a controller's office that reviews the expenditures, and there's a statute for much of our forfeiture money that controls what we can do. And we report that to the Attorney General's office, Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, for review every year. We also, however, get drug forfeiture money from the federal government in something called equitable sharing, which comes with a much broader use that we can put that money to than the state drug asset forfeiture money. And depending on your county and how they spend their money, your county may have a lot of drug asset money or it may have limited drug asset forfeiture money. A lot of what Lehigh County has spent that money on in the past has been what you typically hear about, law enforcement. So we have an armored vehicle and we spend money on drug investigations, and we have drones and we have bulletproof vests and new uniforms and things like that. But what we had not invested in much of is the things that we're here to talk about, like what happens when people who have finished their sentence come back to the community. And in state court, I would say the number of people who are convicted and incarcerated who then come out of jail and come back to the community is probably close to 98, 97%. Very few life sentences. There are some people who die in prison, of course. Some then go to another jurisdiction if they have other cases pending, but an overwhelming majority. It's got to be higher than 95% by my estimation. If you disagree, please keep it to yourself. You know, they're going to come out of jail and they're going to come back to the community. So we take a long-term approach of you know, the hardcore law and order approach says you do as much time in jail as possible. If you get a sentence, you serve your full sentence. The problem with that approach is that parole, from my point of view, and I've seen this from the criminal defense side and the prosecution. So I should mention I started my career as a prosecutor. So I was a prosecutor as a young attorney. Then I spent most of my career as a criminal defense attorney. Now I'm a prosecutor again. And I would say it's good preparation to be a defense attorney, to have been a prosecutor. And it turns out it's good preparation to be a district attorney, to have been a criminal defense attorney. Both of those things have informed the way I've done my jobs. So what we looked at or what I looked at with my team is that these people are going to come out of jail. That's a matter of fact. And if you say no parole, then they come out of jail with no parole. And in state court, that's all we have, parole. Federal system has something called supervised release. At one point in the federal system, the federal legislatures got tough with parole and said, we're not doing parole anymore. And what happens if you don't do parole is that people finish their jail sentence and then they come out of jail with no supervision. They don't have a parole officer. They don't have to go for drug tests. They don't have to go for job readiness training. They don't have to follow up with their mental health. They don't have to do any of that thing because they don't have anybody supervising them. So the federal government, although they're still very harsh and they have no parole, they do have something called supervised release, which to the rest of us looks a whole lot like parole. Serves largely the same purpose. And again, if you disagree,
Yeah.
keep it to yourself.
It looks, in the federal system, it looks more like probation in the sense that you're supervised by the probation office. It's not a separate parole department. There's no such thing as a parole, hearings there. But basically you're correct.
Right. And if you violate it, you go back to jail.
Right. That's the same.
Yeah. So what I've looked at as a long-term approach with my team is if these people that we convict are going to come out of jail and come back to the community, what can we do to put them in the best position that they are less likely to commit crimes when they come out of jail than they went into jail? Now, being as a prosecutor, I think everybody who went to jail, 100% has committed a crime because we are flawless. I'm not sure if you know this about prosecutors. Turns out I learned that last year when I took office. Prosecutors are flawless. So 100% of the people we prosecute and incarcerate are guilty of committing a crime. So we would like to decrease that likelihood that you're going to commit a crime after you come out of jail. And fortunately, it's fairly easy to do that theoretically. It's a little bit harder to do in practice, but theoretically, we know the things that make people coming out of jail less likely to commit more crimes. And they are appropriate mental health treatment and access to it, appropriate drug and alcohol treatment and access to it, education if they don't have that. And if they do have the education that they want or that they need, job readiness training. And then above and beyond that, it's things that are higher up the level of care, housing, childcare for people who have children. So how do you get those things to the people that need them the most to diminish the likelihood that they will recommit, that they will be recidivist and come back into the system? It turns out from a prosecutor's office, the tools we have to achieve that are minimal. However, as I spoke about earlier, we do have money. And we do have money that we can spend with limited oversight, except for like our county gets to see it and our county controller can ding me for it if I spend the money inappropriately. So we worked out an agreement where I consult with them ahead of time before we spend money. Is this an appropriate use of this money? And if they say yes, then we move ahead with that. The second area that we have money on is the opioid litigation settlements. So I assume some of you are familiar with that. Some of you may not be. But years ago, prosecutors, especially in Pennsylvania, sued the opioid manufacturing industry because of the opioids that they were putting on the streets and the harm they did to society and the cost that it came to them. They settled for a huge amount of money. And the settlement was structured in such a way that it's paid out over 18 years from start to finish. Most of the money that Lehigh County gets, which is the only county I can speak of, goes to the county for our drug and alcohol and other rehabilitative processes. But a portion of that money comes to the district attorney's office for expenditures at our discretion with some limitations. When they settled the opioid litigation, there was a requirement that the money that gets paid to the counties be used for shorthand term opioid abatement. And now the longhand term is the document this big that we call Exhibit E, and it has 1 million ways you can spend money of an opioid settlement. And not one of those 1 million ways to spend money is a traditional thing that a prosecutor's office does. So we can't buy stuff. We can't pay salaries of our prosecutors. We can't pay our investigators. We can't use it to fund investigations. We can, if we wanted to, buy a lot of pencils and stress balls that say don't do drugs or things like that. We found, on a side note, we talked to another office that spent a lot of money on pencils that say don't do drugs and gave them out to the kids in schools. And the kids found out that as the pencils were sharpened and they got smaller, they started saying do drugs. And then they just started saying drugs at the end of the pencil. So it didn't take long before the kids, as soon as they got them, were sharpening the pencils down to where it just said do drugs. So we didn't do that. That was not our county, by the way. But we have this opioid money, and we're learning how to spend that in ways that diminish the likelihood that someone coming out of jail is likely to commit more crimes. Now, we can get into the details of that as we go on if necessary, but I just want to say that that's part of what we do. We also prosecute, investigate, and incarcerate people as well. So I don't want to, let's see, I don't know, it's appropriate to say, the phrase is, we have two things to offer, right? We're giving out two things today, lollipops and ass kickings, okay? So we'll offer you a lollipop to do it right, and if you don't, you get an ass kicking. So if you come back, if you're a violent criminal, if you're a sex offender, if you're a child molester, you don't get a lollipop, you get an ass kicking. So what my father used to say to me, I'm giving out two things today, lollipops and ass kickings. Now he finished it up by saying, and I'm all out of lollipops. But, we're trying to change that a little bit to give incentives and to create abilities for people to avoid coming back into the system. Because in the long term, that's what we want. Like I said, I can arrest you, I can prosecute you, I can incarcerate you. I've seen me do it. Right? I know how to do it. My people in the office know how to do it. What we're not very good at is preventing the crime in the first place, which would be good for you, good for criminals, good for the community, good for anyone who's a potential victim of crime, good for your taxes, an excellent expenditure of money if we can do that. And I think we know how. And when we get to it, I'll explain some of the things that we've been doing in Lehigh County. And the best part is that with opioid litigation settlement funds and drug asset forfeitures, it's not taxpayer money. We don't need it to come from taxpayers. It doesn't come out of our county budget. And yet there are eyes on how we spend it, so we know it's spent appropriately, and we're answerable to the public. The opioid litigation has a trust board that monitors how we spend that money, and they punish us if we spend it wrong, or even if we don't spend it at all. So that's a broad picture of what we're doing, and I'll hand it over to my friend and my former boss, Lehigh County Public Defender, Kimberly McCool.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi. Yeah. So I'm Kim McCool. I'm the Chief Public Defender in Lehigh County. So when I've been chief about 11 years now, and Gavin was one of my first hires, I will say. And so when I first started, the office had a couple of investigators, and that was pretty much it in terms of staff, which I felt was essential for public defenders' offices to have. So I am trying and have tried over these past 11 years to develop a holistic model of representation. There are other models of that in the country. Believe it or not, one of the leading models is in Knox County, Tennessee. And they're an amazing public defender's office. And so part of the holistic model is in order to provide services to your clients, and in order to help your clients succeed, and with all the goals that Attorney Holohan talked about with respect to being successful, not recidivating, being productive members of the community, all of those goals in mind, the best way to deliver those services for our clients is to look at the whole client and to say, we have to recognize that there are social issues which drive people into the criminal justice system. And I'm not making excuses for my clients, but we would all be burying our heads in the sands if we did not recognize that there are social issues that drive people into the system: poverty, mental health issues, substance use disorder, and, people who, do not have adequate housing, domestic violence, all kinds of issues that drive people into the system. And so we need to look at those issues. We need to address those issues. But in addition to that, we also need to look at the collateral consequences which happen because somebody has been involved in the criminal justice system, right? Which is often they, lose their job, right? They often lose their housing. They often are unable to live in certain areas depending upon the conviction that they have. They many times are not able to get certain licenses, which prevents them from getting certain jobs. It prevents them from, even getting certain rental properties will not rent to people with certain convictions. And they're not always the sex offenders either that you might think of. People with narcotics convictions often cannot get housing and get the housing that they want, that they might even be able to afford. So that was what I wanted to do when I started in the office, is create that holistic environment. What we did was we not only have our investigators who are vitally important to helping us defend the clients, and that's obviously a very vital part of what we do, is defending our clients, right? And while Gavin says that they're, infallible and always right, I'm here to tell you they're not. And so, and our investigators help us show that they're not. But we also have 2 client advocates. One of them is here. And our client advocates are social workers that come into our office and help with all of these different things. They help us with housing. They help us with drug and alcohol. They help us with mental health. They do the work that they're trained to do, that they're skilled in doing, because the attorneys, quite frankly, are not. We're just not skilled in that area. That's not our area of expertise. So that is vital, I think, for any public defender's office to have those individuals. And again, that has enabled us to create a holistic defense model. Again, those members of our office, in addition to our paralegal, in addition to our investigators, help us provide all of those services so that it's complete. We're not just worried about, and we are very worried about, defending people, defending them on their charges, protecting their rights, but we need to also look at why are they here and how can we help them succeed when they get out. And by the way, I say this from a funding perspective. So we don't, we are, Pennsylvania is one of only 2 states that all of the funds come from county government. And we keep pointing over here because we have a commissioner in the room. So, but it does. However, last year, the governor did put some funds, and he did that again, into his budget for public defenders' offices. So that has enabled us to have a full-time appellate attorney who concentrates just on appeals and on post-conviction issues, which is very important. So we do get that little bit of money. But so, the things that we do, we work very closely with community partners because we need to, and we need to connect them to services and work with other people to provide all of these services that we do. So that's just, we participate obviously in all of the court programs that we have and all of those things as well. But these are things that we do within our office and improvements that we've made over the past 11 years, I think, to deliver that holistic model of representation to our clients. Okay.
So what the hell am I doing here? I got all these esteemed people here. I'm gonna talk about myself.
You wanted this
Do I have
panel.
5 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm a high school dropout from New York City. Had no hope, running the streets. But then I came upon the New York City Public Library, 42nd Street and 5th Avenue. Anybody know where that is? Mm-hmm. And I walked up those stairs. It looks like Supreme Court. And I walked up those stairs, and I always had a love of law and criminal justice. And so I walked up those stairs and I went to the mean librarian and I said, "Where's the law library?" She showed me where it was. And I sat there with the homeless people. I sat there with the law students. I sat there with the kids that were trying to be paralegals. I sat there all day with the Green Lanterns, right? And I studied every day. But because I was a high school dropout, I couldn't go any further. So one day, one of my friends came to me and said, "Vertel, I'm going over to the Borough Manhattan Community College and I'm a register." I said, "Well, I'll go with you, but I'm not college material." So I sat in the back while they were doing their orientation, etc. One professor saw me in the back and said, "Hey, you, what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm just hanging out." He said, "No, you're going to register for college." And the community college saved my life. And I'm going to put it out there, the truth. My whole family of criminals and convicts, probably your relatives locked them up. Right? But the bottom line is, I learned from that experience, being an insider looking out. And then the community college catapulted me. I went to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I got my associate's degree in security management and administration. Wow. I got my bachelor's degree in legal studies. Wow. And then I went on to the New York Institute of Technology and got my master's degree and attended Columbia University. I didn't finish my doctorate, I'll tell you why. But I finished my coursework. But the bottom line is, what happened? 9/11. So I joined believe it or not, the Smokey the Bear Ranger Service, New York City Park Rangers, and stayed there a couple of years. Then I went to the New York City Transit Police Department. And so I was the first female of color sergeant, lieutenant. Everybody with me on that? All right. Now, okay. So then, unfortunately, we had to merge with the NYPD. And I was assigned to the Deputy Commissioner of Crime Control Strategies. And that's where I learned a lot about statistics, evidence-based practice, research, etc. I didn't learn how to teach it, but I learned how to do it. And you guys taught me how to teach it. All right. So the bottom line is this. Why am I here? Because I spent 22 years in service to New York City Police Department. I had to stop my doctoral studies because Chief called me up and said, Vertel, we want you to be the 9/11 coordinator. I said, well, Chief, there's a lot of people that have a lot more influence than me. Why are you calling me? He said, because nobody else wants it. All right, so I did that from 9/11/01 till my retirement on February 6th, 2002. And then I was fortunate enough to get a job here in Pennsylvania, teaching at East Stroudsburg University. I still teach here all these years later. Excellent. I don't want to say how many years I did. Don't do the math. And I was there full time, and then NCC offered me a full-time job here, and I wanted to pay it forward. In other words, the community college saved my life. I wanted to give back, and I did. And that's why I've been here a long time too. But the bottom line is, I'm not as esteemed and practiced as my panelists, but you wait till my presentation comes up.
Go ahead.
You ready?
Right. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to read you a speech, and I'm not boring, as you can tell. I gave a speech a couple of years ago to a bunch of law enforcement practitioners.
Vertel, you need the microphone for the recording.
To a bunch of law enforcement practitioners on the local, state, county, federal levels. And the aim of the speech was to chastise them about how we have to change the way we're doing business. So I'm gonna give it to you. Good morning to our cherished and respected heroes and heroines, our criminal justice system partners, students. This was at ESU alum, and my esteemed colleagues. Thank you so very much for joining us today to celebrate what we contribute, or will eventually do so, to the justice and human service systems. There is no doubt that members of the criminal justice, juvenile justice, and victim services agencies are guardians of our democracy. This reality has been tested in recent years, given the high-profile sentinel events that have occurred. We must deconstruct the notion that we are the enemy of the people. We are not an occupying force, but rather we must aim to build stronger relationships with all members of our community. We need to design and implement a more focused approach on who is actually responsible for the mayhem in our communities. Not just deliver blanket anti-criminal justice personnel, anti-race, or anti-ethnic stances. As criminal justice, juvenile justice, and human service representatives in a multicultural society, we must learn the other's language, values, culture, traditions, beliefs, and mores to become more efficient and effective purveyors of vital human services. The challenge is to continue to build trust and confidence in and from the people we serve in the best and worst of times. We should emphasize empathy, effective communication, compassion, intelligence, and the ability to relate to people on a more personal level. We must try harder to understand the perspectives, concerns, interests, and fears of the people we serve. We must exercise procedural justice, fair, impartial, and equitable treatment, providing services objectively, and at the same time, continue to build relationships that help to overcome suspicion and fear. We must deliberately and actively recruit and promote people from diverse backgrounds because doing so brings more knowledge and skills into our organizations and agencies. What I learned most from my service during 9/11/01 in New York City are what I call the 4 C's and an E: communication, cooperation, coordination, and the exchange of information and intelligence with our internal and external partners on the local, county, state, federal, and international levels. Difference should be welcomed and celebrated. Finally, our to-do list must include overcoming the racial and ethnic divides, citizen legitimacy, the promotion of due process of law and procedural justice, destruction of the respect deficit, multi-sector collaboration between public, private, and community stakeholders, so that we may all come together in a coordinated fashion to define problems and shape solutions to them. Cultural competency and building a coalition of productive relationships to leverage resources, gain credibility, and share advocacy power to maximize positive outcomes. Community-oriented delivery of services and problem-solving methods, predictive analytics, evidence-based tactics, strategies, initiatives, and programs to optimize and maximize efficiency and effectiveness. Both and, not either or. These goals and activities play a critical role in harm mitigation and in establishing and maintaining a safer community, thereby enhancing the vital relationship between citizens and the noble, Braveheart agents who risk their lives to serve them. The end.
Thank you.
Starting with the judge and the 2 attorneys, I'm wondering if you have an anonymous success story that you could share with us as a result of your innovation. Oh, and also, Attorney Holland, you mentioned that there were some other things you wanted to say about Lehigh County. So if you can roll that in as well.
Well, a little bit like the presentation just before lunch, there are a lot of success stories. I mean, it's interesting, even though in the federal system, many of the defendants who come through the system, it's not their first time, right? Many of them, and I don't know what the percentage is, but my guess is it's pretty high, it's not their first rodeo. But even so, the reaction that they have to having this group of people, again, judges, probation officers, lawyers, taking time out of their busy days and weeks, focusing on them, how they're doing, what do they need, holding them to account for their behavior, is, for many of them, they are just so enormously appreciative of that. That's one of the reasons that the work is so rewarding. There are no funds allocated to the program, no court funds, no funds allocated to it. So everybody who's working on it, it's just added to whatever is their the rest of their workload. And just let me think. We have a real range of levels of mental illness. We have some folks where the primary issues, there's a lot of PTSD, the trauma history, we could spend days talking about that, all the way to people who have severe psychotic disorder. I think the ones that I'm thinking of, the success stories, are those who have such significant mental illness, but yet have been able to complete this program. And that doesn't mean that they're never going to have an issue again in their lives. But one of the things we focus on in our program is it's voluntary. No one is sentenced to strides. That's the name of our program. You get referred, the team decides whether it's do we have room in the program, and that's a problem, we're kind of limited. But is it an appropriate referral, and is the person interested in participating? Probably the most important predictor of their success is going to be their own level of engagement. No big surprise there. But for those who come in with such significant disorders, who are able to gather their internal resources together with the support that we provide and make available to them, who are able to successfully complete. And I'm thinking of a woman where, the letters that she wrote afterwards about how important this program was to her. She hadn't seen her children in years and was able to rebuild that relationship, or hadn't seen her other family members and was able to rebuild those relationships. They're just unbelievably rewarding, and gives us, what we need to keep going. We focus to be in the program. You have to fall into a high risk and high need category. You're someone who's going to struggle on your supervision by definition. And because that's where we should be focusing our efforts, right? Not on those, again, just from a kind of best practices approach. You don't focus all your resources on those who are going to do well anyway. You focus the resources on the ones that are really struggling. And to see them meet us and succeed is just great.
I think if we're going to talk about what we're doing differently, not having been in the office very long, there's not really much success stories that I would say. But to focus on like the positives that we do, as I said, we have lollipops and ass kickings. I assume you're interested in the lollipops, so we'll talk about that. All right.
Lollipops are better.
Well, sometimes an ass kicking is necessary. There are truly bad people in the world, and I believe this, and I've seen them, and I've represented some, and now we've prosecuted some who really do need, at least for a period of time, to be separated from society. But as I said, most people are going to come back to the community, and it's my community. I live in Allentown. I work in Allentown. I've lived my entire the career that I spent. My private office was in Allentown, so that's my community. But people are coming back to everyone's community, and they're either going to create more victims or they're not. So some of the things we've done, for instance, Jim Martin was the district attorney before I took over. He had applied for and received a grant from the opioid litigation fund, separate and apart from what we get every year. That grant was $1 million worth of opioid settlement funds. What we did was we took that and we reworked that. We reallocated it so the Lehigh County Office of Drug and Alcohol Counseling could work with Treatment Trends, which is an inpatient drug and alcohol program in Center City, Allentown, one of the few in Center City, Allentown, been there for years and had fallen on hard times for a number of reasons. We were able to allocate that $1 million grant to help Treatment Trends get back on track and get their inpatient drug and alcohol counseling program up and running again. That's a long-term project. Turns out it takes longer to spend $1 million than you would think, but they're working on it. They're doing literally brick and mortar renovations at Treatment Trends, and they're still open for business. So, that's one thing we did with it. We took opioid litigation funds that came to the district attorney's office, and in speaking with the county government about where we could spend those funds, because it's restricted. I can't spend it on police officer stuff, and I can't buy toys for the boys, as we call it. We found out the jail was short on their medically assisted treatment for opioid use disorder. We took $370,000 and allocated that to the jail's budget so they could continue to provide medically assisted treatment for people suffering from opioid abuse as part of their release, their treatment in the jail, preparing to be re-entered back into the community. We have drug asset forfeiture money. And just so real briefly, drug asset forfeiture money is money that comes from when law enforcement arrests a drug dealer, and if their assets cash that they have, that money can be through a court process seized from the drug dealer and then handed over to the prosecutor's office for spending with certain restrictions. But that money doesn't come from drug dealers. Originally, it comes from drug addicts who pay the drug dealers for their drugs. And if you worked with drug addicts or drug users or people in addiction, you know how they get the money any way they can. Some of it work for it. Some of them steal it from their friends, their neighbors, their family, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, the guy who lives upstairs and goes to work. So that money really comes from the community. So it's kind of soaked up, I say, like a sponge or like a vacuum from the community. And then we get it. And so what we've looked to do is to take those same ideas of long-term problem solving, really looking at the long-term approach. So for instance, we have set up a re-entry specialist at one of our community partners in Allentown. And we funded that position with money from our drug asset forfeiture account, where they pay. We've started on a trial basis to see how they do, and they have to report to us, and they have to satisfy our county controller's office that the money is being well spent. But they have a program for re-entry that includes all of the things we would want. Job readiness training, mental health supports, housing assistance, educational opportunities. And these are for people who are coming directly out of our jails and our prison back into our communities. And they've set it up so that it happens almost immediately. So we try to eliminate that gap from the day they leave jail to the day they start a re-entry program. So there isn't that opportunity to screw up in between the two. So we're funding that with drug asset forfeiture money. Our attitude is that money came from drug addicts, drug abusers, drug dealers. We can pump that back into the community and try to prevent that recidivism. We've taken that to our school district. We met with our Allentown School District. I have two of my community outreach people with me today. We met with the Allentown School District and said, what programs do you want that you think would be helpful, long-term anti-crime, anti-drug programs that you can't afford now? And they gave us several options, and we talked about it, and we talked it over with our team. We talked it over with the school district. They've now funded a peer mentoring program in all levels of the Allentown School District, where the high school kids mentor the middle school kids and middle school kids mentor the elementary school kids. The program is designed to attract homeless, kids who have been in foster care, kids who have a criminally involved parent or are not living with a caretaker. And so the school district has just started that. We started that this probably a couple of months ago was when that finally went through. The second program they started at the school district, again funded by drug asset forfeiture money, is what's called Family Engagement and Support Programs, where they identify families that are in more need of services in the community. And then instead of recreating the wheel of creating those services, the Family Engagement Program identifies those families and then matches them up with programming in the community that already exists, whether it's mental health, whether it's housing, whether it's job training, drug rehabilitation services. Allentown School District has started that one just recently. And come this spring, the last program we funded with the school district is an elementary school athletics program, where they're going to try to reach somewhere between 650 to 700 elementary level students in a health fitness program that is sold to them under the guise of athletics, elementary school athletics, something that Allentown School District doesn't have, and doesn't even the community surrounding the Allentown schools don't nearly have enough of it. All of that is over $140,000 in drug asset money that we're working with the Allentown School District on. And one of the last things, I think this is one of our success stories. The opioid money that we get, I said, is very restricted. It's hard to find ways to spend that money as a prosecutor's office. We took the attitude that we're not going to try to recreate something or make an excuse how to spend it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it right. A friend of mine from high school has a daughter who struggled with opioid addiction for most of her adult life. And so when we talked with her, her suggestion was part of the reason women have a hard time completing rehab, especially women with children, is that they're eager to get done so they can get home to their children. They leave their kids in unsafe places. They leave them with unfit caretakers. They worry about their kids, even if they are with someone that they trust. So if we could establish mother-child sober living facilities, these are homes, literally residences, not jail, not house arrest, where they live, get treatment in that home, get services for the children and the mothers, that would be something phenomenal. So our team worked with the county's drug and alcohol agency, and we worked with some private providers in the county. We resolved on this, I think about early January of this year, when we found out how much opioid funds we would get for 2025. And last week or the week before last, we had the first residents move into the first mother-child sober living facility in this region that has ever been. And that's all with funds, like I said, not taxpayer money. That's opioid settlement funds. And we're working on 2 more. So we have 2 homes now that are mother-child sober living facilities. It's a transitional phase, people coming out of jail, people coming out of reentry, and they could stay there for as long as they want. And those opioid funds that come to us pay the daily rate for that family unit, the mother and children. At this point, the age of the children is up to 8. It's 8 and younger. And we have our first residents. So that's been taking less than 3 months to get off the ground. And we're working on a 3rd home, which will be a little bit larger, also in the city of Allentown. And if all of that goes well, I've gotten, it's never good enough to do something because people always want more. The next thing they want is a sober living facility where fathers can live with their children, just like mothers and children can live together, that fathers and children can live together in a sober living facility. So those are some of the things we're working on. The good news is it's not taxpayer money. The good news is it's money that we have to spend and that we're trying to spend it, put it, what we said, our phrase is that, much of this money we've reaped out of the pain in the community, either drug addiction, opioid addiction. So that money has been reaped out of the community and we're trying to sow it back into the community. So we're sowing it from where we've reaped it in ways that in our perception are most likely to diminish long-term criminality or repeat criminality. So those are, I don't know if those kind of success stories, but that's what we're doing.
Sure. Sounds very good.
So I can think of, individual success stories, but I just want to touch on what Gavin was talking about. So unhoused people, and especially mothers and children, is a very common thing that we see in our office. And for all people, not just mothers and children, we see housing as being just an issue that keeps people in jail, keeps people from being paroled because they don't have parole plans. And so one of our individual success stories, I don't know if Anna knows what I'm going to talk about, but there was an individual who was not being paroled, and it was on a relatively minor offense. He did not have an address. We were trying to get him paroled, even though he didn't have the address, but the judge wanted to make sure that he had an address to go to. And so our client advocates worked very hard. This person actually had some money on a debit card, I think it was, right? Yeah. But couldn't access it. And we found him a place to live, but they wouldn't take the card over the phone. It was all kinds of rigmarole. And by having our client advocates, we were able to go into court. We were able to say to the judge, listen, just trust us, parole this person to this place, even though they're not officially living there yet, but we will make sure that they get to that address. Our client advocates literally picked him up from the jail, got him to where he needed to be, helped him register for this housing, helped him get into the housing, helped him get some food. Our office provides for individuals, we have clothing that we have we should see all the clothing that we have. We actually have an area, it's now called a General Services Annex over by Cedarbrook, that we store extra clothing, and we have a huge closet outside of our office, which is, I have to say, meticulously labeled. It's better than any like store that I've ever been at. The sizes are all on it. They do an amazing job. But so they gave this client some clothing, gave him some food to get him started with, and so that he had a place to go. That might not seem, maybe some of you don't think that's monumental, but for that guy, that was everything. That was the difference between him sitting in jail and between him getting out of jail. But in addition to those services that we do and that we provide every day, we started something which is very unique to public defender's offices. We're the only public defender's office in the entire Commonwealth that has this. We have a pardon project, which is part of our PD's office. Now, there are lots of pardon projects. Don't get me wrong. We're not the only county that does it. Other counties do it, but they do it in conjunction with a nonprofit or other organizations. We do it as part of the public defender's office. And what I say when I go to different meetings and different conferences, I always say we have to think differently about public defense, right? Yes, we gotta deal with that charge. We have to deal with so much more. And pardons is such a wonderful opportunity for people to put their past behavior behind them. And we have the cooperation of the district attorney's office. They are part of the team that developed it and that, sits on this team. And we have to, there's criteria, they're nonviolent people, no offenses involving, no sexual offenses, no violent offenses. And they go to the district attorney for review. And so it's really a combined effort, but that coordinator is housed in our office. And, the only problem isn't with all of us. It's unfortunately at the Commonwealth level, it was taking about 3 years before. Now it's up to about 5 to 7 years for people to receive pardons, which is, really horrific if you're somebody that's waiting for that pardon to help you get that license, get that job, be able to live where you want to live. So those are some other things that we're doing. Gavin and I could probably talk briefly about, we are starting, so we've for years had a team MISA, which deals with mental health issues. It's a team, it does not involve, there's no judicial involvement, but now we are looking forward to starting a true mental health court, which I believe the model is going to be for more serious offenses, and the less serious offenses maybe will still go through team MISA. But we have we have a drug treatment court in Lehigh County, and then we have a similar sort of another non-court involved committee that deals with less serious drug offenses that we deal with. So there's countywide, there's a lot of things that we do. And then there are things that we do, within our individual offices. So I don't know if you want to answer anybody else.
Can I add two things just on the side of the kind of the resources and the partnering? Again, the program in our court there's no funding available that we can go after for these programs. So what do you find in the community? Who do you find to work with? And our reentry specialists have been incredibly successful in finding partners, and two that I'll mention are university-based. So you kind of leverage the need that we have to support the folks who are in our program with the advantages to students who are supervised doing work, getting experience, right? So on the treatment side, all of our participants need to be involved in some treatment. But in addition to that, we partner with Drexel University for cognitive behavior therapy. So any of the participants in any of the specialty courts can get low or no cost cognitive behavioral therapy, which has been kind of one of the most popular aspects of the program in terms of the participants' interest in it. And another example is we partner with Fox Business School for financial literacy and opening a small business, coaching and things like that. And again, it's students who are doing it. And so it's very mutually beneficial. So just a couple of examples of where to find and leverage some support even for programs that are not funded.
Okay, we have time for a couple of quick questions.
I got a question. Do you use any kinds of risk assessment tools or needs assessment tools to increase the objectivity of decision-making in your individual domains?
So the main way that it comes into play in our program is the probation department and the pretrial services department each has a screening tool, the PITRA and the PICRA, as well as I think I'm not intimately familiar with it, but as I said before, based on those screening tools, the potential participants, the ones they refer, tend to fall into both high risk and high need. We've done, when we set up the program, we partnered with Drexel Law Psychology Program to help us set it up so that we would be evidence-based to the extent we could. We've done one program review where we partnered with two faculty at Temple and one at Rowan who did program review for us. So we do our best. Our numbers are really small, so it's not been easy to get strong data from the program, but I agree, it's important to do that. Even where it's not funded, it's important to show why are we spending the time and the resources to do it.
Yeah, for our purposes in the district attorney's office, mostly I don't know that stuff. I'm not good at it. We don't do it as criminal lawyers, either defense or prosecution. So I offload that responsibility to the partners that we've joined with in the community. So the unit that's doing the reentry program, that's a program that's existed for years. Our county controller's office actually reviews them, goes over their books, and if they give me the green light that we can use them. This is a new program. The reentry program is new for them. So we've set up reporting periods where they're going to report back to us, and our controllers have agreed to review that to make sure it's a wise expenditure. The other thing we do is very similar. We look for agencies or community partners that we know exist and we know we can rely on. So partner with the Allentown School District. We partner a lot with our drug and alcohol agency in the county to deal with opioid funds because I don't know what the best expenditures are. I can't measure that. And I know that I'm in over my head in that regard. So we go to the people who know better than me and really rely on, I say it's just me shirking my responsibility, but I tell them I'm relying on their expertise.
And we don't, in the public defender's office, we don't use a risk assessment tool, although the different departments that we interact with do have risk assessment tools. You know, we represent everybody, regardless, and then look at the needs of the individual clients. And that's what our client advocate team does, is look at the needs of those individuals to try to connect them with services. One of the things that we did in Lehigh County years ago, and this was an initiative by Judge Reedman, and it dealt with mental health. And it was that we found that people were leaving jail with like 3 days of medication, and they were, they would get out, they could not get in to a provider in time to get another, a mental health evaluation, and they needed to see a doctor. They couldn't just go in for medication. And so we arranged, we worked with different people, but also with our local hospitals and other organizations. And we got an agreement with Haven House, who does sets aside appointment times for our Lehigh County people. So when our people who are on, mental health, drugs and they need to get out, they need to get their medication, the case managers at the jail, as long as they know that they're getting out, and that sometimes that can be an issue, but we try to always make sure that they know they will set up this appointment, they will go there and they will get that, they can get their mental health medication so that there is no lapse and that there is no time when they're out in the community and, decompensating because they haven't received their medication. But to answer your question, we personally, public defender does not use a tool. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can squeeze in a couple of questions.
In the federal system, since you don't have a program that diverts, the pretrial program, if somebody goes through that, does that get them out from under the guidelines?
No, participation, if someone participates as a pretrial track, it does not have any programmatic impact on how their case is going to proceed. Now, there have been cases, they've been rare, where the prosecutor has withdrawn or reduced charges, but it's entirely at the discretion of the prosecution. There has no involvement, or the program has no involvement in that. The judge at the time of sentencing will know about their participation, but there's no specific guidelines impact. And it's entirely in the judge's discretion to what extent to rely on that information in imposing sentence. So it's always been a bit of a challenge for us because it's not a diversion program. We don't have any carrot like we do in the post-conviction track, but we've also never wanted for people who are interested in being part of the program. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. And I just want to say that I think that what you are doing in the public defender's office is extraordinary, because I tried to do it in Northampton County and we were not nearly as successful. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Question. Somebody was over here.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for being here today and speaking with us and sharing information. I live in Allentown and I live pretty close to the Lehigh County Jail. The number of seriously mentally ill people in the Lehigh County Jail continues to climb. In 2020, it was 44 people. In 2022, it was 107 people. And in 2023, 144 people. And we've had 4 deaths there, including another suicide last week, 4 deaths over the last year. I'm really glad to hear that you're considering a mental health court in Lehigh County. Thank you for considering that. I think it's important. And I just wanted to hear what your thoughts are about the number of seriously mentally ill people growing in our jail.
Is this for me or for Gavin or?
Well, the number of seriously mentally ill people in jails and prisons has always been an issue. I look at it slightly from a different point of view. It's been, at least in my perception, a criticism of the criminal justice system and what we do in the criminal justice system. And I don't really perceive it that way. I see it more, and this may sound rude, as a criticism of everyone else who's not in the criminal justice system. The fact is, it sounds flippant, but really society has completely abandoned mental illness, especially for the poor, for the homeless, for those who are mentally ill and addicted to drugs. And so the fact that so many people get mental health treatment for the first time or primarily when they come into our jails or prisons, I don't see that as a criticism of the criminal justice system. It's almost a benefit to the criminal justice system, because if those people were not in our system, they would still be out and they would still be getting no treatment and they would be no better off in their mental illness. So it is a problem that the criminal justice system has to deal with the significantly mentally ill, because that's not what they're prepared for. And they are woefully inadequate in dealing with it well. And it has been underfunded in the criminal justice system, without a doubt. Having said that, the criminal justice system, I believe, is still the largest provider of mental health services in the country. And that's not a flaw of the criminal justice system. That's a flaw of the rest of you people. That might answer your question, but you might not like it.
I mean, the only other thing that I would say is, yeah, so obviously, a jail is not the place for mental health treatment, right? And so, from our perspective, that's where we get our client advocates involved to try to get them connected with services so that they can leave the jail and then go on and receive the treatment that they need. But believe me, it is. I share your concern. It is definitely a concern. I am happy though that we're doing the mental health court. Our team MISA does really good work. It really does. It's a team approach, does really good work, connecting people with different community partners, trying to, follow through with that. So, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
By the way, we are working on a video on the problem-solving courts in Northampton County, which we had actually hoped would be ready for today's event, but we had some scheduling snafus. We just did an interview with Judge Sletvold on Monday, but we will in the next month or two be releasing that video with some success stories from people who have graduated through recovery court and the other problem-solving courts. We're about to start the 3:15 wrap-up and just general discussion. Our panelists, certainly you're welcome to stay for that if you have the time. I know this was a time commitment for you. And I also want to thank you all for being part of this symposium and for all the work that you do. As I said this morning, we were going to spend a day with the superstars of the Lehigh Valley and the region, and we certainly have. So thank you very much.
I have another meeting. Started like.
Well, if you end up going, enjoy.
Yes, you as well. Really great. It's nice to meet you.
My speech right here.
Okay, please, again, stay for just a general wrap up. I'd like to know what you learned today, how we did.
So they walk in and walk out. I did all the students.
He did say, he's like,
Yes, ma'am.
There are a lot more things.
yeah, no, we. Out.
So now it's just.
Will my continue education? I will be here. Well, thank you. That's after the lunch.
Only murder.
Yeah.
So pleased to hear something about the.
Thanks, so. Do you maybe ask him for the
I wanted to say I'm glad. So, shared common ground. Great job. Appreciate it so much.
What time? On the paper all. Oh, yeah, I was.
For.
Yes, I come from here. So I also have. Investigative interviewing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Is he involved?
No.
He can do a lot of.
You say that.
Last year. You don't use it, so you gotta keep up with it every. I'm gonna watch it on recording. Yeah. I saw the letter. It's nice to use, but I have to draft another letter.
I know. It was simultaneous sessions.
I should probably wait. No, and I don't think I to get all this.
Went to one for
Yeah, well, I mean, you can.
Oh, no. Yes.
Still good.
Dog did a pee on my floor. I did my camera. And I hope my dog didn't. I'm gonna say.
I was lucky.
I don't know. Yeah, you wanna be good.
Yeah, because we got a couple.
That was me. I don't think they saw the line. That's all right. You know, I have.
No, I like that.
We're doing this.
I didn't realize that you're meeting.
Was it?
I saw the. She'll go to start.
Go on purpose. No one. Why is it called that?
Sorry, I'm not trying to. I think that's pretty.
Ready to have some fun.
Right.
I like it. She'll play back.
Yes, I am gonna.
Distributed
Make that happen. It's back in the whole. I know, I forgot to look. I was not.
Council.
Right.
If you ever look at.
Oh, yeah, no, except you, Maya and I are evidently.
It was.
Yeah, this is new. I'm not sure to do that part.
Do you how long do you think it's gonna take?
Say if it's a government network.
Because I want.
Business.
It's probably gonna be.
Is that where you're looking?
No. Talk to them.
Do you see her? Do you see her often?
You're not going to. True, and I think.
That state majority.
Like it is the yard.
Anybody else?
Or like social science meetings.
Idea like. Oh.
Could have been on the pen. Everybody here.
I mean, no, I'm really what I'm.
Love.
Saturday, right?
And like here, you can come with this edge down there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing a lot of stuff.
Oh, very nice to meet you.
Thank you. Guys, I don't have any.
You come at the age of. I was seeing. Just to be here. It's just like a lot of stuff. Value. You're gonna graduate.
That's why.
They kept it down. Years. Time. They hired her, they thought it was opening.
Something to belong to.
I mean, it took like a year.
It's not like, first of all.
She's been there.
I was gonna say, I was like, that might be different. Add an extra.
Back in the old days, back in the old days, you turn the way you want. You send it. But I say it wasn't.
That's awesome.
Wonder that about the county.
Oh, okay. So I thought you were talking about.
Yeah, no, I'm being serious.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, we'd like to take a few minutes and just get your general reaction to the symposium. What you think we did good, what you think we could improve on, how we make a better program next time. Open mic sort of thing.
And I remember.
Anybody have a comment other than Vertel?
I was really interested in the applications, so I'm interested to know if there were policies that anybody thought, now that should be changed. Like, yeah, we talked about that in different ways, but that's my curiosity question. Who has a policy they know should be changed?
This is your big chance. Create policy.
Bill to get the Thurmond Act repealed. Very much in favor of that legislation to get the Thurmond Act repealed. That seems to be a silly thing. And just came back from the panel on re-entry. And there's not, I think there are policies within the correctional system that could use some changing. But that's certainly not my area of expertise. But that was a really interesting, ways of doing things, the whole process of de-incarceration and going from that system into the big wide world, and how much is lacking in support for people who are reentering. That was that's a big one.
Anybody else? Any comments on the day? I think one of the themes that ran through this is the notion that we need more mental health professionals. So as I said downstairs, any students here and you're looking for a career, you would fill a very sorely needed spot. And sort of as a corollary to that, the notion that you pay now or you pay later. And if you pay later, it's going to be a lot more money, because it costs a lot more money to treat a problem than it costs to incarcerate an individual. So those are some themes that I think flow through all the panels.
I've got a question about mental health professionals. Social workers are, and there are, I guess, social workers who have training in psychology, intensive training in psychology. And my question is mental, to have a graduate psychologist, a requirement that psychologists are part of this overall team may be at this point not feasible. I've known social workers who with specialties in psychology that are very adequate. And it looks like from the panel this morning that teachers are now developing a real sensitivity. And can we somehow, I know there may not be a certification process for teachers, but it looks like the entire community is becoming a lot more sensitive and capable to address these issues. Could you comment on that?
I will try. I'm certainly not the expert. Again, my background was in primarily in nursing, and the social work as a mental health provider was somewhat new to me. But in the social work field, so you have your bachelor's and then you have a master's and you get licensed and you specialize. You either go the clinical route, which would be more like a psychologist, or you go, which is a kind of a micro, what we call a micro route, or there's the macro route where you're dealing with more public health issues and larger scale social work issues in terms of policy and those sorts of things. So then there is a clinically licensed social worker, and that is someone who is actually able to give diagnoses and do therapy. Actually, licensed master degree social workers can do therapy as well, but you get a second licensure to be able to diagnose and to work intensively with mental health. I think trauma-informed, that concept of being trauma-informed could be implemented in any system that exists in the world. Teachers, social workers, public health people, officers, correctional centers, banks, finance. There's no institution that would not benefit from understanding what trauma-informed care is. And I think also, the world that we live in, we have in a country that has had institutionalized racism and oppression for a very long time. So these are very steeped, the discrimination and the policies that come out of this, like the Thurmond, that's pretty obvious what was going on there. Those are things that we need to be aware of, our history, where these things come from, and how can we take strides to start changing these institutions. And I think trauma-informed care and understanding people's backgrounds and what has happened to them is a good place to start. So social workers, I honestly, before I started getting this master's, because I wanted the mental health expertise to work in our program and to guide the social workers that work with us, I never would have thought of a social worker as a mental health professional either, but it is very much focused in that realm, especially if one goes the clinical route. So, but yes, they can be utilized across social workers and police, in hospitals, in incarceration, in jails. I think trauma-informed and social workers in these realms will help move us towards a more functional and compassionate world. Did I even close to answer your question?
I think from a policy standpoint, then that a liberal education, should require, maybe there should be requirements at the college here that anyone who wants to get a degree or certificate should be trauma informed. There should be coursework that's required, training that's required, since it is, all of our organizations need to be sensitive to this. And so maybe that's a sort of a broader lesson that we're learning today.
I agree.
Anybody else have something?
Okay, I just want to say that I yesterday got on YouTube and watched about Buckminster Fuller. How many people know about Buckminster Fuller? He was an amazing person, and one of the things he says is we are all born naked, helpless, and ignorant. And that's what life has to do with us. And you should Google and watch his talk that he gave at MIT.
And some of us try to advance beyond that.
Just a comment on the certificate. We do have a non-credit certificate in trauma-informed teaching that we developed last year. It's online and run by Dr. Jen Bradley. So it's a possibility for anyone who wants to take that course. In the general structure of an AA or an AAS, we require people to take some sociology and some psychology. The thought being that you do need to understand yourself and others as part of a liberal education. But the specifics that you're describing are things that I think those who teach in that field are probably interested in incorporating into those general courses. So, but thanks for the suggestion. I'm going to keep it in mind.
Thank you.
Other thoughts?
You want to speak?
So what I wanted to say kind of builds off a comment and a question I had in the previous panel. And it was just a thought about how we conceptualize and how we talk about mental health and trauma with people in our communities. Just as a quick background, I worked in behavioral health support with families and their children in homes and communities for 10 years. And I've been teaching in the psych department here I'm going on my 15th year now. And so focus a lot on mental health and trauma and other things, psychology. But I think that we really need to start reframing the conversations that we have about mental health and trauma. And not that we need to abandon the morality approach, because I think, everyone in here knows that there's value to that. And if you're here, you're empathizing, right? But not everyone does. I talked about in the last panel, the paradox of trauma. Like, we've all experienced it at some level, but oftentimes we don't recognize that and we fail to understand that it's a root of the problem in other situations. So I'm just, thinking about how can we reframe this conversation from a very solution-focused, evidence-based perspective? It's not about okay, well, you really need to understand. No, you don't need, this is what it is. This isn't a moral standpoint. This isn't my opinion. This is the fact. This is how the brain is affected by trauma. These are the outcomes of trauma. I mean, we have evidence to support these claims. And I think that when we're having conversations, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's with people out in our community, we really need to kind of take more of that position, right? Less of appeal to empathy with people that we know aren't going to empathize with us, and more of just, this is the fact. This is how it is. This is the science behind it.
So I'm thinking about, Benet, you made a joke on the panel about how you're going backwards in pay, right? For going into getting the social work degree. But I'm thinking of all these positions in the community that become catch-alls for makeshift social work sometimes. So you have librarians, right? That are that is the place people go when, they can't go to the shelter, right, until a certain time, right? Or people from thinking Southside Branch, Bethlehem, right? People come from New Bethany, people come, so librarians can be sometimes the catch-all, right? You have hospital chaplains, at St. Luke's. They are the social workers aren't on over the weekend, perhaps. So you have chaplains, right, that are seen as religious folks, but actually they are providing resources for families and individuals that are going back after a hospital visit, not knowing what they're going to be confronted with, right? Because now they have a diagnosis, they have a disability, some major life trauma has happened, including people that are struggling. And I'm just thinking even so I understand the need to say, yes, we need more social workers. We need more people going into be educated to become social workers. We need more mental health professionals. But I also think of how do you sustain that work, right? So you get your master's, you become licensed, you go through all that. And then, not that anybody does this for the money, right? But how do they make a living? How do they take care of themselves? How do they prevent burnout? Just all these different things to think about. Not trying to politicize this, but, is there going to be financial aid to be able to do that? Is there going to be, if they go into public service, will there be forgiveness because they know they're not going into a high paid position? So, all these things are also systemic in nature. So I'm thinking yes, it's nice to say we need more mental health professionals, but for all of us,
how are we going to support that? How are we going to support people going into the field? Or how are we going to bridge gaps with people that are maybe can't go into, for whatever reason, can't commit to an MSW or something, but are often in positions in the community where they're trying to help people with resources. So there's nothing to do with that comment. I'm just thinking like, how do we fill those gaps in all of our areas?
I want to continue that topic. So I worked in community mental health, and a lot of the parolees, right, are in the demographic for community mental health. So the service providers, the social workers coming into those like nonprofit, a lot of them don't even make enough to sustain themselves. They're paid for service. They have a lot of cancellations. So if they have a no-show, they're not getting paid for that hour. So a lot of them have to leave to go to another job, a different type of career path. So then now we no longer have those social workers filling that gap. So I think probably trying to push, like Magellan, can increase the pay. Nonprofits do it. They're constantly just refusing that increase in pay. So how do we get them to actually push the compensation?
And I might add to that, the increase in pay would be great, but also let people be able to get the education, afford the education. The degrees are excessively, I mean, I will never make back what I'm paying for this master. I'm just not going to. And I know that. But I'm going to do that. Not a lot of people are going to do that. So how can we let people, bright, energetic, enthusiastic young people, how can we get them the education without completely flattening them, especially when we're not going to have any loan forgiveness if you go into nonprofit? And I think if organizations or we can somehow sustain putting people through these programs and getting them educated, that would be a really good start without putting them into just massive debt.
Here.
Yes, I think student loan forgiveness is one of the mechanisms that we might be able to use, but in the current environment, I wouldn't hold my breath.
I'll let you know.
Right.
Let you know how it goes.
I'm on the board of a seminary that took seriously that very problem of putting students in debt who were going to go out to jobs that would never repay them. So they dropped the price of a graduate degree to the price of a community college degree. They do it very differently. It's online. They have a platform for almost anybody's courses. It's competency-based. You have 3 mentors who help you through. One is a spiritual mentor, one is a personal mentor, one is a career mentor. They help you pick your classes and they help you get your competency-based, there's 7 that you have to fill for particular degrees. But there are people out there who've taken this seriously and thought that it is wrong to put people in debt who want to serve. So you can look this up. The school I'm on the board of is called Kairos, KAIROS.edu. And there may be others that are not coming at it from a faith-based perspective, but that one anyway is. So don't lose hope. Kairos.edu.
Thanks. Anybody else?
The corner, Joe.
Oh. Oh, we go to the media.
Hello. Off the back of that, I'm a first-year student here. Financial is a big issue. I want to go into academia someday, and that's terrifying. The cost is terrifying, and that's a huge driving factor in me, 1, being here, and 2, pursuing a career that isn't, doctorate and PhD focused, and not hoping for that PhD because I'm probably not going to financially be able to ever get it. 2, the question I had was, there's a lot of stigma around mental health still. How do we destigmatize what is stigmatized still, while also not trivializing, like, you see it on TikTok and you see it on Twitter. Oh, I'm so depressed. Oh, I'm so anxious. Oh, I'm just so traumatized. But that's not like they mean it in the very casual way and not in the diagnosis way. How do we not trivialize that anymore without trivializing the rest?
Buddy? Thoughts? Good comment.
It's a good question, for sure.
Answer.
I don't know how
Oh.
good of an answer I can give, but I'll give it a shot. I think what you're asking and what you're speaking to is incredibly important. Stigma has such a huge role to play in the way that people even seek help, right? And I think for me, at least, I don't know how well I can speak to it, but to start that conversation, at least to, as in our own circles, keep pushing to the people that we know and even to people that we don't, that it's okay to ask for help and it's okay to be experiencing these issues. It's okay to not be okay that so many people go through them and have that experience. Something that I learned in my own mental health journey is that I felt like it was normal to be so depressed every day. Because like you said, people on social media are like, oh, I'm so depressed. Oh, I'm so anxious every day. And it's like, okay, well, it's normal to just feel like this. Everybody feels like this, which is not the kind of normalization that we should be looking for when we're talking about these issues. It's normalization that, yes, a lot of us experience this, but it's also the fact that you're going through this is not normal. It's not normal to be so depressed all the time, but it's not normal, but it's okay. And okay, not in the way that we should accept it, and live with it, but okay in that it doesn't make you worse of a person for being so sad every day. Other people have it worse than me. It doesn't mean that you don't have the right to feel that way and to go through the experience that you're going through. So I would say just, in our own circles, in our own communities, reinforcing that it's okay to not be okay. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Didn't one of the earlier panels talk about I think one of our first panels had talked about incorporating trauma-informed education into schools very early on. And so I think just building on what Victoria said, just normalizing mental health through part of the conversation, with our peers, but also especially with children, like as a parent of a child who has ADHD, I often find myself having conversations like, wow, you're feeling really angry right now, or you're having a really hard day, rather than saying, stop it, don't do that, right? And so I think all children should be parented that way, right? And we need to help people understand how to talk about emotions in a healthy way and not look at, behavior and trauma as things that are bad or negative, or I shouldn't say trauma, but like the expression of trauma as things that are bad or negative or shameful. So I think just making emotions a normal part of a conversation early on is really important in promoting good mental health in a community.
Any other thoughts? Like Phil Donahue.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to commend the Lehigh Valley Justice Institute for holding a symposium and having a day full of productive conversations about the work that's being done within the Lehigh Valley to mediate the struggles that are within our community. I wonder if in future iterations of the symposium, maybe we could include policymakers in the area and maybe get them not only to see and hear from these productive conversations directly, have it open to the community to bring up issues that concern them directly. It'll kind of act as not just a listening session, but also educate them at the same time. That also opens up the floor for potential workshops about how to become a casual advocate. You talk to them and say, hey, this is something that's affecting us, and get a little bit more of collaboration from the policymakers directly. I think that'd be, if possible, I think it would be a really good addition to the symposium in future versions.
Thank you. This sounds like great ideas. And along those lines, any thoughts that any of you have, please email them to us, info@lvji.org, for future programming that we might want to do. And also when we do this map tomorrow, we're going to be interested in people's suggestions on more data sets that we could upload on the Injustice map. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to address that. I think that's really important. Joe Welsh is the executive director, or actually is stepping out as executive director, and Victoria Wrigley is really ultimately going to be the leader of the operations of the organization. But what Joe is going to continue to do is he goes to all the city council meetings, correct? Significant meetings. He goes to county council meetings.
Last week, Joe.
He participates in the dialogue. He informs folks, commissioners and council members. And it's so important that I don't do that. I should be out there as well. We all should be out there in the body politic, otherwise we're really lost. We're going to lose this battle that we want to be engaged in because we're here. So I want to commend Joe and also Victoria for the work that they're doing. They're undercompensated, but they're doing a remarkable service to all of us and to our community.
I would just add to that a very important note that even with our staff, Victoria, Eli, myself, Nicole, who was here earlier.
Jose Rivera is here.
Right, Jose from our board is here.
On our board.
But the work that we do, we could not do the volume of it without our really intensive internship programs. Right now, we have 7 active interns. We've had over 30 in our history. And they do, first of all, I love going to career fairs here and at the other colleges and universities because it gets me away from CNN and all of the down news, and I see the future. And there are so many students in all of our Lehigh Valley schools and beyond that care deeply about social justice issues. And they not only care deeply about social justice issues, they care about doing the nitty-gritty work to build the case for why certain policies should be implemented. So it's always refreshing to me to go to career fairs. I'm keeping that part of the job, by the way. That's too much fun. But seriously, we could not do what we do without really, really good top-notch interns that we have. Oh, and also Bob Walden, our treasurer, is here. The masked bandit back there. So we're kind of at the end of time. Anybody have any other comments? Now, keep my staff happy and scan that QR code, because we had a debate about whether we should have paper surveys or QR codes. And they won the debate. We have a QR code and we're doing it all electronically. Once again, just thank you so much for your attendance and helping us with really good questions and ideas. And we'll be doing this again. So. We'll talk about the Central Park 5 movie at all.
Throw it out there.
Yeah.
Take care.
More fun today.
While you're all still here, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that there's going to be a screening of the Ken and Sarah Burns and David McMahon Central Park 5 documentary at Steel Stacks tonight. It's in the Frank Banco Ale House Cinema. And so we're going to do the screening at 7, and then there'll be a talkback panel, which Joe will also be a part of. Thanks, Joe.
Say no.
To reflect on the documentary. And so that screening tonight and really a lot of different things that have been going on this semester are all building up to our keynote speaker, Dr. Yusuf Salam, who's coming here on April 15th. And so I passed out some flyers this morning. Tickets are free. Please sign up, tell your friends if you're interested in coming, and we hope to see you tonight. Thanks for coming today. Oh, and we'll see you tomorrow.
I'm gonna finish up the office real quick.
Yes. I'm going to snack and I'm gonna check my email. Because I know I'm like, oh, I don't know. Gosh, he is.
I'll do a city council.
Yes.
Yes.
Not old. I end up sitting there until like 7. And then I'm not sure why. And then I'm like, yep, got it. This morning, almost. I didn't. 20 years I've been out.
I need a nap. No? I don't think there's.
Yeah,
like 3 of them. I don't even see lips.
yeah, that's where I saw her.
Coming to the session, right?
Yes, I am.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I don't know. Too. She'll point to something and you're always the point to the apple. But I was thinking, attention. Like I was too busy talking about this. No.
Screening.
Was like the be about today. I think Joe Moore ticket. Yeah, whatever. I know. I don't know. You just say anything that would be. Yeah. But and then we met him at the. I met him at the Sheridan.
Kind of like rendezvous.
Well, anyways, we're doing a wrap. This will be quick and special. We're doing a wrap up session for the symposium, and they're like, okay, any idea? It's great. So, but they were like, how can whoever was like, what? And then they had me call.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure. Dog. I'm like, no, it'll be take care. Like, really well. And then I was like, yeah, I wonder next time she could have Elizabeth Buck. She brought me. And I was like, yeah, definitely don't fill that out. That's not part of it. And I finished like blaming like what like implemented like feature, and I got the mic back, and so it was like, you're definitely her sister. And I was like, thank you. Yep, the fuck I am. One of our parents. See, she was. Yeah, he goes, you definitely her sister, and I'm like, yeah. What like, yeah. What about it? Like, hello. Yeah. And what I was like, I literally.